Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that has now featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but they've become very well respected, and quite rightly so, based on the experiences I've had with them in the past. It's most definitely fair to say that these guys are best known for the different kinds of New England hazy, whatever we're going to call them, IPAs. So if that's a style that you enjoy, this is one of the Swedish breweries that I highly recommend that you check out. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It is supposed to be quite nice, so needless to say, I'm quite curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a bit north up toward Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer is called Samhara. It comes in at 6.5% ABV, and as you might expect with Apex Brewing Company, this one is a New England hazy, whatever we're going to call it, IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Local Osmoskelig assortment through Systembolaget in Sweden for September of 2022, but it was released a little bit before that through Glassbanken.se. So yeah, check them out. Very good service. Actually, but a little bit more expensive than Systembolaget, but you do get the beers a little bit fresher. So up to you how you want to do it. But yeah, this one should be quite interesting. We've had some very good New England hazies from Apex over the years. I forget how many of them we've had on the channel, but we've reviewed most of their beers, I would think. So yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see how we go. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. There's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is hugely appreciated, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Swedish list, and the whole tagging system that the channel uses is based on geography. So search for your hometown or whatever you like in there, and you'll see some things pop up. But yeah, let's crack on and have a little look at my brewery notes for Apex then. So Apex Brewing, as I've mentioned to you before, were originally based in Nora to the north of Örebro, and the company was founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchitz and Niklas Lundgren. So both of these guys are musicians, and Niklas played in the band 59 Times the Pain, whereas Daniel played in The Voice of a Generation. So Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing side of the company, but there are a few others involved in the business side of things as well. So this is Leif Carlson, Ola Eriksson and Roger Hjelm. And these guys started off with a small 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and they were just selling their beers in the local area before they got them into Systembolaget, and I believe I reviewed their first beer that they released through Systembolaget here on the channel, and that was simply called Single Hop, and it was a Citra New England IPA, and it was very nice, I have to say. But the following year, in 2018, they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer, and there was about 25 different varieties released, all of which were New England hazy IPAs. And then the following year in 2019 they'd grown quite a bit, and they brewed 120,000 litres in total. Over the following years they continued to develop new recipes and then get their beer out there a little bit more. But in the summer of 2021, they announced that they would move to a new premises in the Baytorp district of Örebro that autumn, and they have moved there, and their brewing is up and running there. But this new facility will see them upgrade their 500 litre brew kit to a 2,000 litre system. They've added several new tanks, and so they have a lot more capacity in this new facility. As of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 115 different kinds of beer. As I mentioned to you before, this brewery is known mainly for their New England hazy IPAs, but yeah, they have done a few lager beers in recent times. The Kella Pils and the Kella Märzen are both definitely worth checking out actually. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and of course you can check out my older reviews and the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about the different beers that they've done. So yeah, let's crack on then and have a look at this beer itself. So once again, it's in a 440ml can. There you can see the lovely Apex Brewing artwork with this one. There you can see another one of the Apex Brewing symbols on the side, the name, Samhara IPA, and then one of the other slogans that Apex Brewing use, music, beer, music, people and beer, sorry. So yeah, 440ml can, this one. It cost me, I believe, 50 Swedish kroner, so that's about €5, £4.50 sterling, maybe in the region of $5.50 American. I think the exchange rates are about that at the moment, but I do apologise if that's wrong. But yeah, quite a reasonable price for a 6.5% New England Hazy. So the specs on this beer, the malt base and the hops. So this one is hopped with Citra Mosaic and a Maltere. So Citra and Mosaic we know quite well, both American, both 14% alpha acid. Citra is going to give you that big juicy mango, but with a bit of stronger tropical fruit behind it, and it can also give you a bit of a kind of lemon limey character when it comes to New England IPAs. Mosaic, on the other hand, has a little bit of distinctive earthiness to it, but also a nice big kind of bright juicy tangerine. Maltere is a New Zealand hop, which I've noticed a few Swedish breweries have been using this recently. I had it many years ago. But Maltere is quite a high alpha acid one. It can be about 17-18% alpha acid. New Zealand hop, as we've said, it's known for its distinctive kind of pininess, but it also gives you quite strong grapefruit and passion fruit flavours as well, in my experience. But the malt base in this one is extra pale, chit malt, and also 2 different varieties of oats. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. But I think that's all you need to know about the beer. As we said, 6.5% New England Hazy IPA. I think we can get this one out and get on with the tasting now. Yeah, let's see. I've noticed that Apex went for a wee while without releasing too much through Systembolaget, but now they seem to be doing things regularly, which is good. I missed my Apex beers for a wee while, and now we've got a lot of them to look at. We also have a collaborate, and need to do the collaboration sour beer that they did with Stockholm Brewing as well. So yes, that'll be interesting too. Been a wee while since we've reviewed something from Stockholm. But yeah, anyway, we've got the beer out and into the glass so we can take a look at it. So before the head disappears on this one, you can see that this beer is poured with just very slightly under a 1 finger head. The bubbles on this one, this is a nice big foamy thing. Look at that. It does look very, very nice, I have to say. But yeah, the head in terms of its colour, I would say, is kind of creamy coloured. It's not perfect white, but the head does look very, very good, I have to say. The other thing I would point out about this beer is that the opacity, the haziness of this one is pretty impressive for a 6.5%er. But I remember that, you know, just from memory, beers that use chit malt always tend to be a little bit more kind of a little bit more hazy than some of the other ones. So yeah, level of haziness on this is quite interesting. But remember, the level of haze in these New England IPAs depends on the oak content, wheat content, and also the yeast that you use to a degree. There's not really a rule about going further up the scale and there being more oat and wheat. Thus you have more haziness. It's not quite that simple. It can vary from brewery to brewery and even beer to beer. But yeah, this one, for a 6.5%er, I think the level of haziness on that is pretty damn impressive. But yeah, colour of this one, I would compare this to a nice mango juice. It's got a lovely kind of quite bright but still slightly rich yellow colour to it. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. The length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect that as well, but when it comes to New England IPAs, you don't really have to care about those 2 variables that much. Yeah, it's very rare to have to care about those. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the appearance of this beer. 1 or 2 big bubbles of carbonation sticking toward the side of the glass, but a few wee ones going up toward the bottom of the head. And the head has incidentally now faded away to be a nice kind of thin foamy layer. But yeah, I think we can take a look at this and at the aroma and see what we get with this one. It certainly looks the part of a New England IPA, but let's do the aroma. Oh yeah, that's quite nice. But it does smell quite distinctive, I will say that. You know, Citra and Mosaic are hops that we're quite familiar with, but the Malteri is one that it can be a little bit it can be a little bit different. And when you sugar the beer up, you will get some of that distinctive kind of piney note from the green component of this beer. But what I will say is the malt base on this one comes across as being really kind of like, it actually comes across as being really kind of barley malty and bready, like a sort of dusty white bread. The green component does have a wee bit of that more aggressive kind of piney note to it. And then you've got some nice, just soft juiciness as well. And this is one of the things that I always find interesting about Apex Brewing is, yeah, they only really brew one style, but they show you a lot of the different kind of nuances and the different ways you can make these beers lean. And I mean, for me, there are 6 kind of variables to consider with a New England IPA. They can be a bit more farmhousey and grainy. They can be farmhousey and yeasty. Sorry, they can be rye leaning and grainy, wheaty and bitey, oaty creamy, you know, bready from the barley malt, or they can be a little bit kind of sweet, but quite often they'll show you a number of those characteristics. And Apex are quite good at making their beers lean different ways to suit the different hops and things. I'd be curious to know what their creative process is with the beers. Do they choose the hops, or do they make the malt base and then choose the hops to suit? It'd be quite interesting to know that. But yeah, anyway, that's a little bit of a side there. But like I say, this beer, it does smell quite interesting, quite distinct from some of the other Apex beers we've had in the past. Yeah, I mean, we'll start with the backbone of the beer, as we always do. You get a little bit of that kind of fresh white bread, hedgehog roll bread crust in there. That is absolutely forming the backbone of the beer. On top of that, yeah, lovely soft white bread, you know, from the barley malt, I would say. You can smell that the wheat is thickening. You can definitely smell that the wheat is thickening the whole beer out, actually, and you do get a little touch of wheaty bitiness in the back of the nose. But yeah, the more that you smell of this beer, the more you start to get the oats. And remember that when it comes to oats in a New England IPA, they are often an indicator of how old the beer is. You know, if the oats are really kind of fresh and creamy, if the oats are really kind of very fresh and or if the beer is really fresh, the oats will come across as really creamy. But the older the beer gets, you do get a little bit more dryness out of them, and you get a little teeny touch of the dryness out of this one. We're not reviewing this beer at its freshest, I will point that out. But yeah, for me, the oaty notes in this one come across as very smooth. It almost reminds me of, there's a few elements of like oat milk in the malt base of this beer when you smell it. It does give you a little bit of that kind of nice sweetness that you expect of this style. So yeah. Aroma wise, yeah, I like this one very much. The malt base, it's quite straightforward. You get a little bit of bread crust, maybe a little touch of Jacob's cream cracker, some dense white bread in there, nice little bit of oaty creaminess. There's a wee tiny touch of like a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. But yeah, aroma wise, I think it goes together quite nicely from the malty perspective. Let's go on to the hoppy side of things then. So remember, with New England IPAs, these rely mainly on late addition and dry hopping. Late addition gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping is completely about flavour and aroma. Early addition hopping is the one that gives you all the bitterness, and that is more common, of course, in West Coast IPAs, although not exclusively. West Coast IPAs use all three, New England IPAs tend to use the latter two. But anyway, yeah, aroma-wise, this one, on the green side of things, you get a little bit of that distinctive earthiness from Mosaic in the back of the nose, but there is quite a bit of a kind of floral character. I hesitate to say pine. I always think that pine comes out more in West Coast IPAs because you've got more early addition hops, and I think hops tend to show their kind of stronger piney side when you've got a bit more depth to the green component. And as I say, that comes with early addition hopping rather than late and dry hopping. So yeah, you can smell a little bit of that pininess from the Malteri. And Malteri can be quite a dominant hop in my experience. You can smell a bit of that in this, for sure. But yeah, there's earthiness in there. You do get a little bit of that piney note, but there is a wee bit of spicy floral character as well. And Mosaic and Citra are both capable of giving you that. And you've also got some nice, you do also have some nice grassiness at the front of the nose with this beer as well. And it's quite a wet, grassy character, actually. Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm curious to see. I think that's going to be quite different when we actually taste the beer right enough. but the green component isn't too pungent in this one. But the fruity side of this beer is quite attractive, I have to say. So I can smell a wee bit of I do smell a wee bit of a more pungent grapefruit in there, but I'm actually getting a lot of kind of juicy mango. It really, if I was smelling this blind, I think I could probably tell you that it was, one tropical leaning hop and one orangey leaning one. I don't know if these days if I would get that it was Citra and Mosaic. I'd probably doubt myself because you've got a Zaka, a Sabro, all of these kind of things on the orange side, and then likewise with the tropical side, you've got Victoria's Secret, Idaho 7, all of these kind of guys too. But yeah, back in the day, before there was so many hops, I'd probably be able to tell you this was Citra and Mosaic, and it strikes me as being very Citra and Mosaic-y leaning. So yeah. But yeah, you get that big juicy mango. There are hints, apricot and stuff like that, and there's a bit of depth to the tropical fruits basically. And then yeah, you have that nice kind of tangerine, orangey character out of this one. So it's a really interesting smelling beer, this one, and it gets a thumbs up from me in that sense. I'm just curious to see how this is all going to translate into the actual flavour. But yeah, as I always say, take a wee bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But we are going to have a taste of this one and see what we have. So yeah, this one is the Samhara, a 6.5% New England Hazy, whatever we're going to call it, IPA from Apex Brewing Company in Örebro. Sláinte, skål, cheers. Oh yeah. I'm going to say this one actually has a really juicy and wet fruity impact to it. But you definitely get, the Maltere, as I suspected it would, because it seems to do that. Maltere is not the most pungent of hop in its aromas, I would say, but at least in the New England style. The West Coast, I've not had it in for a long time. But yeah, in the New England, it really is one of these ones that comes out into the aftertaste. You're definitely getting that kind of piney, resiny, almost spicy character out of this one. So yeah, that is pretty awesome. But yeah, that's a really very nice, smooth and drinkable New England IPA. Overall, I would say this one, it leans a bit. It actually leans. If I was tasting this without knowing the malt base, I would say that this is one of the ones that actually leans a little bit more towards the slightly farmhousey end of the New England spectrum. That is interesting. But as I say, this is why I like Apex. Even though they only brew one style, I would love to see them do some West Coast and some black IPAs. That would be awesome. But they really do show you the different ways you can make these beers lean, because every IPA they have, it leans a slightly different way. So do try a few of the Apex. If you've not tried Apex before, get a couple of their beers and then do a side by side with them, definitely. So let's break this one down then and describe it for you a wee bit more in depth. So middle third of the palate, backbone of the beer, absolutely, you've got a little bit of that fresh white bready bread crust in there. It is actually a little bit more kind of grainy, and I think that suits the slightly spicier side of this beer that you get from the hops. This one definitely has a bit more of a stronger green component to it than some of the other Apexes we've had recently or ever, I would say. So yeah, definitely more of a kind of grainy bread crusty backbone there. On top of that, you have a nice little bit of Jacob's cream cracker. You just get a little bit of that sort of crackery dryness. And then on top of that, you have a kind of more fluffy, white bready character to it as well. Yeah, you've got that fluffy, white bready note to it, which is, the barley malt in there. And I think it's probably the chip malt that's given the bread just that. It's almost got a little bit of that kind of crispiness to it actually that you get when you toast bread very, very lightly. It's got a little bit of that going on, so I suspect that that's the chip malt for sure. But on top of that, you can feel the wheat just densifying the bready layer of the beer, and it gets, it changes a little bit into the back part, but we'll come to that in a minute. On top of all of that though, you get the oaty part of the beer coming out. So yeah, on top of the wheat layer, and I will say the wheat layer isn't too dense in the middle third of the palate, but yeah, down the kind of middle line of your tongue, you've got that more kind of porridgey, yeah, you have that slightly more kind of porridgey, oaty type character of the beer. So yeah, that goes right down the middle of the palate there, and as you move further out, you actually get a bit of sweetness from the oats down that middle line of your tongue. But yeah, as you move further out toward the edges of the palate, it does show a little bit of dryness. As I said earlier, we're not drinking this beer in its freshest time, but it's still in good condition. But yeah, you start to get a little bit of dryness from the oats as you move out toward the edges of the palate there. But in the dead centre of your tongue, there is a little touch of you'll find a little circle there in the middle of your palate, and there's a wee bit of that Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. That is the flavour from the alcohol in this beer. The alcohol is always covered by a little bit of brown sugar, so yeah, you have got a wee touch of sweetness in this one, and maybe a wee hint of a biscuity character again toward the edges of the palate there. But I think that covers the middle third of the palate in this one. I think we've described that fairly well. Let's look at the back third of the palate then. So, yeah, the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit. You get a nice little bit of a bready build up there. Yeah, nice little bit of a bready build up. And it's a bit more of a kind of grainy bread actually, but yeah, the sort of bread crusty base on the back third of your palate is distinctly more grainy into the back third of the tongue. On top of that, you can get a little bit more of that. You can feel that the sort of crisp layer of white bread from the chip malt is a bit taller for sure, and it almost feels a little bit more crispy. Remember, more grainy flavours tend to come out further back on the palate. More bitter, grainy flavours come out further back on the palate, sweeter flavours come out further forward. But yeah, on top of that, you can feel the wheat, and the wheat is actually a little bit spicy in this one. You do get a little bit of that nice kind of wheaty spice coming out of the beer in this. Then on top of all that, you're getting some of the more yeasty elements there. So let's look at that. So yeah, on top of the wheat, on top of the wheaty bitiness, you get that nice airy, you get that nice kind of airy white bready character, and it has got an element of, you know, that woody, slightly farmhousey note to it. But the wheaty spiciness actually dominates a little bit more into the aftertaste. You have got an almost peppery spiciness to the wheat coming out in this one, but definitely on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. And as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together a wee bit more. But yeah, overall, I would say the malt base in this Apex one does strike me as being a little bit more kind of farmhousey and almost slightly spicy and dry compared to some of the other Apexes that we've had in the past. But still, I like it, and I think it suits. I think it suits the hops. And as I say, I'd be curious to know which way around they go. Do they design the malt base, then add the hops in, or do they choose some hops and then, you know, build a malt base around that? Yeah, interesting. But let's focus on that hoppy side of the beer then. So, green component first. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got a nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, you get a wee touch of herbal note, but then you can feel the Malterre really creating. The Malterre gives you this big dank, it really does give you this big dank piney resin. It's a bit smoother toward the back, but then as you move forward toward the front corners of the palate, you start to get this kind of spiciness, this big floral spiciness in there. But yeah, that kind of danker and more oily pine resin underneath, and that of course lingers into the aftertaste. This one definitely gets a wee bit more bitter the further into the aftertaste you go. But round the front curve of the palate, it's a bit lighter and more grassy, and the grassiness in this beer, in fairness, is actually quite wet. So I think that's quite that is quite interesting for sure. The green component has, you know, earthiness and quite a bit of bitterness on the sides, but it's very mellow around the front curve of the palate. So that's another point of interest with this beer. Front third of the palate then, and the fruity side of the beer, the border region between front third and middle third of the palate, again, a little bit of bready build up. The base of the front third of the palate is a little bit more kind of smooth and white bready, and then on top of that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And then yeah, the fruits are kind of as you would expect in this one. And in a lot of ways it comes across as a Citra Mosaic New England IPA. It feels very, very familiar. But yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, you've got a really kind of strong, pungent grapefruit. And a bit of a more, it mellows out to be a slightly more pungent passion fruit as well. And that's, the Malterra is the one that's going to give you the really strong grapefruit in this beer, I think. And it's also going to contribute to a little bit of the tropical character as well. So with this one, for me, it's actually quite a bright and juicy mango. It's almost got a little bit of a kind of green guava type quality to it. I've always found that guava is like a very ripe and green mango flavour, so I'm getting a little bit of that. So grapefruit, a little bit of a very ripe mango, slightly guava, and as you move into the middle of the front third of your palate, it's got a wee touch of, it does have a wee touch of, kind of apricot-y. It does have a bit of that touch of that apricot, the slightly dry apricot, dry mango type note. But then as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's all about the kind of tangerines from the Mosaic, and it's actually quite juicy in that sense too, but a little touch oily, I would say. Definitely a little touch oily. In terms of you do get a little touch of an almost limey character at the front tip of the tongue from the Mosaic, and that kind of blends in with some of the grassy notes you've got there. The limey note's going to come from the Citra, not from the Mosaic, but I do get a little touch of a slightly limey note on the very tip of the tongue when the fruits are mixing with the grassy esters. But other than that, I think we don't need to say anything more about the flavour of this beer. But this is quite an interesting Apex beer. This one has made me think a bit, and I think it's maybe just because I haven't had Malterra until quite recently. I forget, was it one of the Fermenterra beers that had Malterra in it? But yeah, needless to say, Malterra is quite an interesting hop for sure. And it's interesting how, suddenly all these breweries in Sweden get interested in this one hop and they all use it. It must just be what's available, and then they start playing with it to see what it's like. But Malterra is a hop that I hadn't had in quite a while until recently. Another solid New England from Apex. Let's round off with the mouthfeel then. We've kind of talked about this throughout the video. So yeah, mouthfeel wise, this beer is right in the middle of the spectrum. It's quite smooth, but it does have a little bit of a kind of wetness to it at the same time. So yeah, nice little bit of wetness, but a little bit of smoothness in there as well, which I do, I have to say, I do quite like. It's kind of a smooth IPA, this one. It's not the thickest that we've had from Apex. It is a little bit lighter and a little bit kind of drier in a sense. Overall, I think this one's slightly more bitter. I wouldn't be surprised if this is 35 or 40 IBUs. It could well just be the big piney resiny notes from Malterra that are giving it that, that are giving me that impression. But the Malt Base, as we said, is a little bit drier, a little bit more kind of farmhousey and things like that. Not such a big degree of sweetness in this one compared to some other Apexes that we had. But Apex beers always are a bit more kind of bready and farmhousey in some ways, but they can lean all over the place. And then you've got that nice kind of juicy, fruity character out of this one, but it works. It works very, very well for me. A really interesting beer, and I like this with Apex. When you try other things, it does make you think a little bit. But I think we can leave it at that for this beer, to be honest with you. A really interesting one, so try this. This is quite different from what I remember of the other Apex beers. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex as well. And we'll be reviewing more from this brewery in the next couple of weeks. So keep your eyes peeled. Thank you for watching. Check out my social media. Check out theirs. This one was the Samhara, 6.5% New England IPA from Apex Brewing in Örebro here in Sweden. Slanja, skål, and cheers.